So today's ad slot isn't sponsored. Instead, I want to tell you about a charity I work with who could really do with some extra help right now. I'd like you to contemplate for a moment about how you feel when you're really hungry, or if you have a child, how they behave when they're hungry. Terrible, right? Hunger affects everything: behavior, mood, concentration, ability to learn. A hungry person, and especially a hungry child, isn't anywhere near their best self. Magic Breakfast provides free, nutritious breakfasts to over 1,000 primary, secondary, and ASL special educational needs schools across the UK. Every school day, they offer breakfasts to up to 200,000 children. But it's also not just about the food. I've visited their schools, and their clubs also serve as a place for children to come together, get support from teachers, catch up on homework, relax with friends, even get their hair braided. How needed is this charity? Sadly, very, and more so than ever. According to government statistics, before COVID, around 1.7 million children in the UK were living with food insecurity, meaning that they're at risk of hunger in the morning. That number is now looking closer to 4 million. And of course, with the cost of living crisis, it's just rising. I volunteer with Magic Breakfast. I'm on their development board, and I know the money goes where it's needed to supporting children, as well as lobbying for policy change to encourage the government to step in. Magic Breakfast actually always say that their ultimate aim is to make themselves obsolete, to end child hunger for good. If you have the ability to support a hungry child, please do check them out. It's magicbreakfast.com. Thank you.
Through my career, I think it had probably been building, particularly in the last few years. And then COVID was such a sort of shock to the system, just in terms of the volume of tragedy and also this new disease that we just didn't know anything about before. So that as we came out the other side, I had one bad case that sort of tipped me over the edge, and I just sort of stopped being able to function and got into a kind of ruminating, anxious, self-blaming state, and then gradually, at the time I thought it was just one event, but gradually as it went on, it became apparent that this was, this had been building for a while.
Welcome to Priorities, the podcast about the things in life that really matter. I'm your host, journalist and coach Lily Silverton. And each week, along with a roster of incredible guests, I'll be exploring how priorities inform and transform our lives, sharing mindset tips, strategies, tools, and inspiration to help you prioritize your own life. We'll be covering what we think is important and unimportant, what we'd like to work on a little more, and the moments that changed our priorities and lives forever. I hope you enjoy. My guest today is Dr. Jim Down, an author and a consultant in critical care and anaesthesia at University College London Hospitals. During the pandemic, Jim worked on their busy ICU ward, and his account of that period, Life Support, was published in 2021. He's now written a new book, Life in the Balance, which is really unflinching in its account of the realities of intensive care medicine. I loved it. Jim tackles questions of right and wrong, the blurred lines between life and death, the life expectancy of health practitioners and mental health in such a pressurized environment, and so much more. He also, as we discuss in this episode, has to make priority-based decisions daily at work, and I think the insights from his experiences will be helpful to anyone. And just to say that Life in the Balance comes out on the 23rd of February, so depending on when you're listening to this, you can either pre-order it or buy it now. I really do recommend it. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today? We're recording in the afternoon. How's your day been so far?
No, it's been good. Yeah, busy. Well, I've done just getting used to this podcast world, which is new to me.
Has this been your day, podcasting?
Well, it's my second. It's not. I know I haven't been, but it's it's been good. Thank you.
Good. Hopefully you're not like all burnt out by this point. And
No. I'm still in the sort of beginner's nerve stage rather than.
So I start by asking all my guests whether they have any kind of routine in the mornings. But so yeah, do you have any sort of morning routine? I've read your book, which suggests.
No, I've been listening to your podcast, and it's very interesting. And so I do now have I never used to. I used to be a sort of do exactly what was necessary only, but now I have become a full blown cliche. And I go at about 5 to 7 every morning. I'm queuing in the dark with a bunch of old men and women to get into our local Lido. So I do that pretty much every morning, unless I have to get to work too early, and have a sort of a plunge in the cold water, and then come home and I'm completely out of kilter with the rest of my family because I'm absolutely hyper, and they're all I've got two teenage twins who are, you can imagine, are utterly they just want to be asleep at that time of day. So there's a sort of big disconnect, but it's nice actually. Now they're very used to it. And I've also recently, in an attempt to be more healthy, I've become a porridge convert. So I do that as well. So I'm a full-blown middle-aged cliche.
Do you have the whole kit out? Do you have like the boots and the hat and the dry robe?
So I have, I wear, at the moment it's cold, and I wear gloves and boots, but I shamefully I slide into the water. I don't dive in. So there's a really nice bunch of people there, and some of them have been doing it for like 35 years, and they all dive in. But I think that might be the end of me. So I slip in, but I do stay in a bit longer than them. That's my riposte.
I absolutely love cold water swimming.
Ah, do you?
Yeah, I really do. But I don't. Obviously there are always excuses because this podcast is about priorities and you can make time for things, but I've got 2 quite small children. So the sort of opportunities to go first thing in the morning, which is ideally when I'd like to, and do it, and not very there. There's nowhere that close to me as well, I guess.
How old are your kids?
1.5 and 4.
Oh, yes. No, that's a very different time in life, isn't it? I don't think I'll be able to do it then.
We're the opposite.
But it's interesting because you say about the morning. I mean, it's totally. If I don't get to go, then it's unlikely I'll go. It's part of that is, it's the routine. It's the people. They're a very nice bunch of people, and there's no sort of there's no match. It's just it's a sort of just a guaranteed laugh. The nice people. So I do it for all that as much as the cold water, if you like.
What's the effect then on your mental health doing it?
Well, I started because I was in a bad a phase of bad mental health, and I was in a period of anxiety, which was sort of overwhelming at the time. And a friend of mine who's an actor does it. He got stage fright and he started doing it. And because we live very close to the Lido, used to pop into us and shiver quite often afterwards. And I always thought he was, crazy. But at that time, I thought I'll do anything. And it was amazing jumping in the first time, which is nearly 2 years ago now. It was the first time my head cleared because I just focused on staying alive. And it was wonderful. And so I'm sort of an instant addict because of that. Sort of just forgetting about everything. And it seems to still be helping. I mean, I don't know, but it seems to be really, it seems to set me up for the day. It wakes me up. It's a routine. There's lots of sort of little aspects of it that just seem to start me off on the right foot.
Do you feel like an ice bath would do the same, or is it something about the swimming and the community and?
Yeah. So I couldn't. So I know that there's a big thing for cold showers, isn't there, at the moment? Mm-hmm. But I've got 2 problems. One is that was a punishment at my school, so I think I'd have terrible traumatic flashbacks. And it was a quite, as you can imagine, quite a progressive school. And And the other is that I think if I wasn't like swimming as fast as I could, I wouldn't be able to tolerate it. Because there are people who go to the Lido and just stand, in some sort of Zen state, and I don't know how they do that. I have to be swimming as fast as I can, which is very slowly.
So you've actually said to me that one of your priorities is your mental health. So you've mentioned cold water swimming. Obviously, I mean, you have a job which by anyone's standards is pretty demanding and has been even more demanding over the past few years. I just finished your book last week, Life in the Balance, which I really, really enjoyed. And I'm conscious I'm asking quite a few questions at once here, but my main question is, what else do you do for your mental health to support yourself in this very demanding work that you do?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been an anxious person. I think, ever since I was a kid, and it's a strange relationship because in some ways it's been helpful in that it's pushed me to do things. I was always sort of looking for fires on the horizon and putting them out, and to a certain extent that got me through exams and all those kind of things quite successfully. But through my career, I think it had probably been building, particularly in the last few years. And then COVID was such a sort of shock to the system, just in terms of the volume of tragedy and also this new disease that we just didn't know anything about before. So that as we came out the other side, I had one bad case that sort of tipped me over the edge, and I just sort of stopped being able to function and got into a kind of ruminating, anxious, self-blaming state. And then gradually, at the time I thought it was just one event, but gradually as it went on, it became apparent that this was, this had been building for a while. And I had some help, had some sort of talking therapy, which was really helpful at the time. But as soon as I walked out of the room, about 10 minutes later, the cycle of negative thoughts came back. So eventually I ended up doing the swimming and taking antidepressants. And that combination really helped me. I don't know if it's for everyone, but I was really surprised by the antidepressants in that they seemed to give me a bit of objectivity, a bit of space to sort of, rather than be in the middle of the cycle of negative thoughts, I could kind of stand back from it a bit. So that was really helpful. And then, I mean, the other things I do, I do quite a lot of exercise. Generally, that's sort of really helps me. And at the moment, I'm sort of seem to be okay. And I'm trying. I mean, my big problem is uncertainty. I have a real problem with dealing with uncertainty. I want to rule out all uncertainty, which is not feasible, obviously. But and I'm sort of like trying to come to terms with that. That's a big kind of learning thing I'm trying to do at the moment.
How are you trying to do that?
That's a really good question. Well, yeah. I mean, there's what's this serenity prayer, isn't it? And I think it's distinguishing the things you can control or can change and can't change. And I suppose it's that. I mean, with work particularly, the big problem for me is whether I'm good enough at it or not. And that's really because although there's often not a right thing to do, whatever you do choose to do, might have a very serious impact. So you might have two choices that have both got problems and benefits, but then which one you don't know which one is going to be the right outcome, and that's that I found really difficult. But I think what I'm trying to do is just accept that, I'm very lucky. I've got a lovely family. I've got lovely colleagues. I've just got to accept that you can't control everything and try and live within those parameters. But that's working at the moment. I don't know if it's going to work for long.
I think this as well, and I think you touch on it in your book to some extent, like with your work, well, anyone's, I suppose, the better that you get at it, the more that you do it, the more sort of almost emotionally fallible you become with it. Where at the beginning, you've got this sort of like arrogance of youth and just all guns blazing right in, whereby the more that you do it, what I've understood from your book, the more that you've done it, the more that you've experienced loss and change and shifts and uncertainty and that lack of control, the more that your, I don't know, arrogance of youth sort of starts to drip away.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true for me. And I think and I wasn't expecting it. I'd assumed I'd become, and I think I probably write this in the book, I'd assumed I'd become this, wise elder statesman that people would come to and I'd be able to go, yes, my child, and all this. And in fact, the anxieties just shift to a different form. So I think there's one thing in that you feel more, well, because the patients are now more my own age, most of them. So when you're 25 and they're 70, they feel like a different species, I mean, obviously you care about them, but they're not your peers or anything, most of them. And the ones who are so unlucky, they feel, you feel that it doesn't refer to you. But obviously as you get older, they come closer and closer. And so that's odd because the decisions feel much closer to home. But also you've been surprised more, you've seen really unlikely things happen. And so almost the more you do, the less sure you are about it, as you say, because that arrogance goes away. And I've seen this in, some of my really respected colleagues in the last few years, and I'm not in the last few years yet, but in that have struggled more and more with decisions because I think they feel the weight of them more. And that's got good and bad sides. I think, it's good to be thinking obviously very hard, but to a certain point, a bit like the sort of anxiety curve, if you get to a certain point, you stop being able to function. So you have to keep an eye on it. And I think that's good. I mean, I'm quite lucky because I've got quite a lot of younger colleagues and we can sort of, debate with each other, which is quite helpful. But yeah, no, definitely hasn't got easier or at all.
Hey, if you're enjoying the themes in this podcast and want to delve a bit deeper into prioritizing your own life, come on over to my Substack, Prioritize This, where I release weekly essays, voice memos, and coaching questions on priorities, habits, values, and generally the stuff that makes for a better life. Search Prioritize This on the Substack website or app. I'm curious, because you've put mental health as one of your biggest priorities before this period that happened about 2 years ago. Would you have said it was anywhere near the top?
That's a good question. I've had periods of anxiety or related to life events, but I probably wouldn't have put it. No, I probably wouldn't have been. I thought I had it under control. I thought I had a system that was okay. I exercise, routine, work. I had things that my kids, etc. And I suppose this event was a real wake up to how vulnerable that is. So yeah, probably not. No, probably not.
Do you feel like it's given you a much broader understanding, perhaps, of some of your patients?
Yeah, well, I think. I mean, it's interesting with patients. I mean, because my patients are so sick, I'm always reluctant to try and. I mean, I obviously try and empathise with them, but to try and put myself in their shoes, I always feel a little. Sometimes at night, I think, as I'm in my lovely, bedroom, I think of them stuck with lots of tubes and wires in. But I think that it's very hard to imagine being in those positions, isn't it? Until you're in them. I think what I have thought is I have thought about colleagues and other people who have, who have suffered with. I mean, mine was not that bad. I never felt I wanted to take my own life or anything like that, and I always wanted to get better. So I'm not claiming to have had a terrible period of mental health, but it made me realize how desperate people must get. And I remember, after, when I wrote that chapter in the book, I read it out to our department, because, well, for a start, I thought I had to be brave enough to do that if I was going to publish it. But also I thought, it just made me think, oh, I wonder how many other people are feeling like this, but don't feel they should, feel okay to share it. It was a daunting prospect, I have to say.
What was the process? Carry on.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to ask you about the process of writing the book. So you go first, if there was a...
Well, no. So, yeah, I mean, it came out of the first book. So I wrote a book just after COVID, about COVID. And at the time, the agent who very kindly took me on said, do you want to write another one afterwards? And I remember going for a run and thinking, well, I really do, but what am I going to write that about? So I tried to come up with a sort of format of using cases to illustrate the things that, confuse or stress or worry me at work, and gradually sort of came into the structure. And then the other thing, at the time, I remember thinking, why would this be interesting? And I thought the only thing I can do is be as honest as I can, So that was really the two things that started this book. And then, but funnily enough, I'd written some of it before I got ill, and then so it was odd, or not, before I had a bad period. So it's sort of that came. I mean, I stopped writing for a while, but then came back to it when that had happened. So it sort of weirdly fitted in a way with how the book, with the structure of the book, I suppose. I've been trying to write before, very unsuccessfully. So I wasn't. So I had been having a little bit of practice.
So how do you make notes for years, or do you just have an incredible memory?
No, so some of the very old ones, I mean, the first thing I wrote about in the book is just one of those things in life that you just think, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. And it's just stayed with me. And I've got a kind of photograph of that moment of someone saying, you should have told me about this. These things kill people. And just feeling like an idiot. And also sort of taking on how serious it was. So that just stayed with me, and then other bits. Funny enough, a lot of them came from giving lectures. So I, at the time, gave a lecture about the train crash, and I gave lectures about the London bombs and lectures about Litvinenko. So I had all that sort of documented in there. And then, and COVID, obviously, I wrote about. So it's sort of from a mixture of things. And bits and bobs I've written down over the years, in other forms, trying to work out how to write.
So it's some of the basis there.
Yeah.
I was reading it, just going, does he remember all those conversations?
Well, I mean, yes. Well, you obviously, the ones in the books are the ones I remember. I mean, some of them are a little bit paraphrased. Obviously, don't tell anyone. But they're and the cases are not. Some of the cases amalgamated because of for confidentiality. So the sort of I've had to change things because although quite a few patients and relatives, in fact, have given permission, which has been amazing. And I've been in touch with people I hadn't spoken to. They're one of the victims of the London bombings. I saw at the inquest, and then I rang literally, 4-5 months ago. In fact, hopefully I'm going to go and see them up when I go up to the Hay Festival, going to go and meet them, their parents, which is amazing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So you actually put, as one of your other priorities, writing and work, which you said feed into each other.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's really interesting being asked your priorities, isn't it? Because it makes you think, I should have different priorities. My priorities should be world peace, and but so I was trying to be honest, and I think I have this kind of, I quite like having a structured bit of work, and then, but I've always had this hankering to do something sort of creative without meaning to sound, like a sort of whatever. But so now, the writing is a good sort of yin and yang with the work, if you like. And I have a couple of days a week, because I work, weekends and stuff. I often have a couple of days in the week where I can just sit down and write. And it's usually about work at the moment. I'm trying to write fiction, but that's difficult. Really difficult.
Everyone has an idea for a book.
Yes, not necessarily a book though. Yeah. So I suppose I was sort of getting that they kind of feed off each other.
Mm. Well, the work that you do is very creative, presumably, like within the confines.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but yes, I suppose it is. I've always had this hankering to produce something, I suppose, which is why books, is a solid thing that I mean, it is, of course, and I mean, yes, it is, but it's different, I suppose, different form of creativity. It's interesting. I don't know why. Yeah, I like having I like the structure of a place with lots of people, but then I love sitting in my office on my own and tapping away.
Mm. I find it interesting that you talked about thinking about your own priorities, because as far as I could tell from the book, a lot of your work simply is prioritizing the whole time, constantly. So in my mind, you're an expert at that.
Yeah, but it was really interesting writing. So there's a chapter about the daily struggle about beds, essentially prioritizing what you're going to do with your limited number of beds with limited number of staff. And this is a thing we do every day, particularly in the winter. We spend more time than we'd like to working out who we can, which big operations we can do and which we have to put off. And as I was writing it, I realized the more you think about it, the more complicated the prioritizing is. And you can end up, going round and round in circles with the benefits and the harms and the possible harms and the and it was a really good exercise for me, because it made me realize that it's sort of infinitely complex. But you've got, we've got to get on with the day. So you're just having to find that balance. So yeah, I mean, we do have to prioritize a lot. And I think we have to accept that, particularly at the moment, obviously, but healthcare is limited. However much we'd love it not to be, unless we spent the whole GDP on the NHS, there's always going to be more you could do, I think.
Mm. You good at prioritizing your own life personally?
Am I good at it? I'm good at aspects of it. I'm good at doing the things that I know. So I'm good at getting up and going for a swim. I'm good at doing exercise every day. What I'm bad at is I'm really impatient, and I hate I hate when I'm like that with the kids, and I don't relax into time with the. I mean, I do, but I find that difficult to sort of think I'm just going to absorb and love this time with the kids, which is like what I want to do, but for some reason that process I find really difficult, because I feel like I'm always telling them to do something, and sometimes I just wish I would stop doing that and go, let's just not do anything, which is what they want to do, obviously.
I think you are definitely not the only parent that feels that way.
Yeah, but it's hard, isn't it? Because then because we've got twins, so they get older at once, obviously. So these stages are gone, well, every stage is gone every day or whatever. It's, yeah, I wish time would just stop for a minute and I could go, I'm just going to enjoy this. I'm not going to worry about making them brush their teeth and go to bed or do their homework, whatever it is. But,
what would happen if you did that for a day?
Well, if I just let them do what they want, they wouldn't come home. They'd be hanging out in Camden till 3 a.m, I should think.
That's what I did when I was younger. So
is it?
I fully support that.
Well, they do it pretty much. Yeah, already. Did you? Is that where you're from?
Yeah.
Ah, right. Ah.
Do you find it easy to relax?
I do if I'm doing something. So I find activity relaxing. I'm terrible at sitting on a sun lounger. I can't get in. When I was about 18, I went to Australia and went straight to the beach and surfed and then came out in blisters all over my body and spent about a week in bed in agony. And I've basically avoided the sun ever since. And I just can't. I mean, I love reading. I suppose reading is the one thing I can sit and do, and I can watch telly for hours like everyone. But relaxing for me is usually doing something, I have to admit.
Same for many people. What about switching off from work?
Yeah, it comes and goes. I mean, that's interesting. I as long as there's not something there that's hanging over, I'm okay at it. But if there's something there that's worrying me still, that's really difficult. And that's why I couldn't be a GP. I think GPs are amazing because they're constantly having to make calculated risks. Say this, you're fine, go away. If it doesn't get better, come back. I'd be thinking, what if it doesn't get better? What if it doesn't? And I know that's tough on GPs. So if I have something like that, I find it difficult to turn off. But if I think I've put it all reasonably, left it all reasonably tidied up, then I can usually turn off.
So it's like those clear boundaries that the ICU gives.
I mean, I think that's right. I think
even if the stakes are so high.
Yeah, but it is contained and it's immediate. I mean, people are there for a long time, but the things you do, you can see them. You can see the change in front of your eyes, and I like that. And we sort of quite clearly delineate. We cover it for a while, and then we pass it on to a colleague. And then we'll talk and stuff, but you do have your responsibilities quite circumscribed, if you like, which kind of suits me.
Do you have any tools that you use to switch off?
Not very clever ones. What do you mean? I have so definitely, if you ask my wife, she'd say, you come in, say hello and go straight out running. So I do that and it's really unpopular, but now we've agreed that when I get back from running, I'm a much better person to spend time with. So she now, if I don't turn around and go out running, she says, "Oh, don't get out of it." So I'm good at that, and I have a kind of, I have a 9 o'clock. You can watch TV thing. Do you know what I mean? So at 9 o'clock, you don't have to achieve anything else in the day. But I don't have any. She tried to get me to do yoga quite a lot. I don't know. Are you a yoga person? Or are you? Yeah. You see, I should be doing yoga, but for me, yoga is just being in agony because which is really bad because which means I need to do it, doesn't it? But even when they're saying, and now just relax, I'm thinking, I'm not relaxed.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I'm actually, I trained as a teacher in 2016. I don't teach very much anymore, but if you're a runner, then yoga is particularly painful.
And important.
And important, yeah, in terms of keeping you healthy and moving for life.
I know. I'm going to do it again.
Yeah, I try not to talk about relaxing too much when I did teach? Because I knew that for a lot of people, it wasn't a relaxing experience at all.
No. Oh, I see. But right. Do you do the sort of mindfulness with it, kind of? Is
A
that
little bit, yeah.
right? I
I
mean, I
teach
can really
mindfulness separately.
say it again.
I teach mindfulness separately.
Oh, right.
But yeah, I try to, I mean, I don't teach much anymore, but I did try to integrate it. Maybe you could find a yoga for runners class.
Yeah.
Specifically.
I mean, the other thing about it that's really interesting is that I felt so self-conscious. I went to this class with my wife, and it was in a village hall. It was incredibly relaxed, but I felt, like, you're terrible at this, and all these people are really good at it, and it's ridiculous. There were 8 people there who couldn't give a monkey's whether I was good at it. But you know what I mean? You just think, why can't I do that? So I really need to do it. I'm going to do it. I keep telling my wife I'm going to do it, and now you've said it, I'm going to do it.
There's lots of good. I can send you one if you want. There's a really good yoga for runners online one that you can do.
Oh, really?
15 minutes when you get home from your run. Yeah. To build up.
Okay. And you should do it straight after a run as a warm down type thing. Stretching.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe even get your wife involved.
Okay.
Wants to do it with you.
Oh, great. Well, I shall do this.
So
Are you a runner as well?
No, every time I go running, something messes up in my body. So
oh, no.
I'm not running.
Yeah.
I love it, but every time something happens, I danced when I was younger, so I think most of my joints are just too vulnerable to entertain running.
Too flexible, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
And they've taken just a bit too much impact already.
What kind of, were you a ballet dancer?
No, contemporary.
Oh, right.
Mm.
Wow.
So we talked about your wife, which brings us on to your third priority, family.
Yes. I mean, I think that's slightly, it's interesting because I've got my kids are 13 now. And so there's that stage of letting them go to a certain extent, and knowing how much to, and trying to decide how much influence you have and how much you should have, and I find that quite complicated. So my son our son is quite, he's quite gentle and he's fairly useless, but he's lovely, and he'll, he won't listen to this, will he? But he's quite malleable and people pleasing and all that. And our daughter is very very strong-willed and opinion, and again lovely, but very sure of what she wants. And it's really, I find that drawing that line about how much free rein to give her quite difficult. So I'm doing a lot of thinking about that at the moment, I suppose. And I think it's hard, isn't it? Because there's two of you, two parents with different views on what is and isn't a good idea, and so there's a lot of sort of finding our way through that, I guess. But it's going okay so far, I think. And then the other bit I wrote that is because my mum died last year, and that was that makes you think about family a lot, and think about my dad on his own. So that's all, the extended family's all in my mind quite a lot, I suppose. But he's got a new family of Ukrainians at the moment, so he's I know.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. Yeah, it's challenging, I think, but it's amazing. Yeah, it is amazing. Yeah, he's right. I think.
So you actually, when I asked you in advance if you'd had a moment where your priorities had really shifted and you thought about the world differently, you actually talked about your mother. So do you want to talk about that a little bit more? I feel like some of your insights would be really helpful.
Yeah, so I think, so I suppose the thing about my mum was that she was so fit. And so when she was 75, I guess, she was, she was as fit as anyone in our family. She could walk 30 miles, play tennis for hours, etc., etc. And my dad was actually need to have lots of joint replacements. So if anything, he was the less fit one. And then she got dementia, and pretty rapid. So she died, I think, within about 6 years. And for the first 4 of those, she remained physically very fit, but obviously her brain deteriorated. And it was a shock to me, because she's the glue that held our family together. Really, she was the sort of, she was the one always looking out for everyone else, and she was incredibly, amongst some quite fiery people, she was the sort of stability. And but she never wanted to talk about it. She was always interested. She never wanted to talk about her illness, and she never talked about it. She never really, even when she could, she never missed it. So there was a complete shift in our family dynamics, and it made me, obviously I felt sad about losing her, but it was a very gradual process, and now I find it quite difficult to hold on to. It feels like sand going through my hands a bit, because trying to think back to the person before is quite hard. So it's just, I don't know, what has it done? It's made me appreciate what I've got. It's made me feel a bit more vulnerable about the future. Because I've also got a great aunt who's 110 and going strong.
Wow.
I know. It's really weird, isn't it? 110. I mean, she must be in the top 50 or something. So there's a bit, so I had sort of thought I had quite good genes, and then I saw this happen to Mum, who'd seemed so sort of invincible, that it just made me rethink about what you've got, how temporary everything is, and how you've got to get on with it, I suppose. And in the end, she was well looked after, and she died very peacefully. But it was odd, because I'm so used to being around people who are dying, and seeing relatives react. And then when I was there myself, I suddenly understood why they react like they do. So even though I knew that she, we shouldn't take her to hospital or anything, because she was dying of this disease that was incurable, for a moment I wanted to scoop her up and take her to ITU and put her because I just couldn't bear the thought of it. And I suddenly got, and that's how I see relatives do that quite a lot. They totally accept it logically, and then suddenly they get panicky and want to do everything. And it suddenly, that really became clear. So it were lots of things that I sort of learnt from it, I think. But yeah, one of them was definitely understanding people's reaction to the end of life, I guess.
I'm sorry for your loss.
No, thank you. No, I mean, yeah. Thank you.
And I'm sure that perspective has in some way, deepened your connection to your patients.
Yeah, I think that's right in a way. I mean, a few years ago, I decided that when I first qualified, I thought when you're telling bad news or breaking bad news, you should be very, unemotional and, express your condolences, but not show emotions. And then I sort of changed and thought, well, is that, that seems a little bit cold. And so now I don't force emotions, but if I do feel emotional, I don't sort of hide it. And when my mum died, the carers in the home were very upset, and I found that incredibly lovely. And the thought that they liked her and cared about her, and I mean, I don't go to the funerals of my patients, but they came to it was just, so I thought, actually, why wouldn't someone want you to be upset? It's I mean, I always felt guilty that I was making it about me, which is ridiculous. But obviously, but I thought this is my place to be upset. But actually, I think generally, not always, but generally, people are pleased to see that it's affected you.
Yeah, absolutely. To see that human side.
Yeah. So that was certainly my feeling when it happened.
Mm. I'm curious whether we've talked about priorities. I'm curious whether you have any values that you think about often, either in your work or your life.
Oh, yeah. Well, oh, gosh. I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, I suppose it means what you mean by values. I mean, I was brought up a Catholic, so I've got all sorts of issues there. I mean, I'm an atheist now, but I'm a Catholic atheist. So yeah, and I spend a lot of time thinking about my values and my patients' values and their relatives' values and whose are the most important in that situation. And, there's a big thing in my work about when does a life still have meaning and when is it just cruel to keep pushing someone through, because IT is horrible. I mean, there's no getting away from that. I mean, we try and make it as unhorrible as possible, but it's not, no one wants to be on ITU. And that issue about, when is the suffering too much for a small chance of benefit, that we all struggle with that all the time. And of course, different cultures and people have massively different views on that. And if someone wants to stop, but that's very easy, we don't make people have anything. But if they want to go on and on and on and on, that gets more and more difficult. And so I don't know where I am on that still. I don't know. It's really hard because the other bit on it as well is that it's usually not the person; it's usually their family that are saying they want to carry on and on. And so you've got that third thing it's not actually them telling you, which is, so I don't know if I've answered your question, but those are the things that, I don't know what other, yeah. Those are the values I struggle with, I guess.
Mm.
Are those values? I don't even know if they are values.
Yeah. Open to interpretation.
Yeah.
Jim, what's something that's not a priority to you at all? What couldn't you care less about?
Well, this stuff is my thing that, so I don't get, watches and cars and things like that. And I really don't really get, like posh wine and posh food. And, now there's a bit of a caveat to that because if I was left on my own, I think I wrote about in this book or the last one, when I lived on my own before I was saved by my wife, I had two microwaves on top of each other, and that was my cooking. I was surviving, but I wasn't perhaps thriving. And my house was painted colours that I just hadn't thought it'd need change. So what I'm getting around to is that my wife makes our environment very lovely, and I don't want to sound unappreciative of that, because it is lovely, and I know that it makes me happy. But I suppose I don't have yearnings for kind of sort of possessions, and I don't mean that in a holy way at all. I just, if I get something like that, I usually lose it or break it or worry about losing it or breaking it. They just don't give me pleasure, really. And I don't want to claim, I don't want to live in a shed in a hair shirt or anything, but I guess that's something that I don't prioritize, I suppose.
Has that always been the case?
Well, Well, I used to pine for things, but then when I got them, like even toys as a kid, I'd really want something, and then when I got it, I'd unless I could kick it or ride it, or you know what I mean, or do something with it, I usually lost it. And so part of this comes out of the fact that I'm not very good at looking after things.
You're too busy looking after people.
Better at looking after
stuff.
Yeah. I hope so.
That anticipation, right? I read somewhere recently that like the day that you're most excited and happy about a holiday is the day before you go.
So true.
So you might have a great holiday, but it's really like that anticipation, and the brain just loves the idea of looking forward to something rather than the reality, which is fleeting or doesn't quite match up.
Well, I mean, so I think, so I once had going on from that, I had a lecture, it was at a medical conference, and someone said, all you need in life to be happy, as if I'm going to cure it with these three things, is something to do, someone to love, and something to look forward to. I'm sure that's everywhere. But to me, I was like, that's how I feel. And I often go back to it and think, but there's a brilliant thing about the holidays. Have you read Kahneman at all?
Yeah.
His thing about the remembered, what is it? The lived experience and the remembered experience, I think it's. Yeah. And, holidays, he says, we look at people on holiday, they're generally arguing, but then they look back at it as an amazing time.
Yeah.
And it's so true. And there's so many things like that, aren't there, where your remembered experience is different to your lived experience. And then he has this big question about which is the important one. And I don't know the answer to that. But yeah, it's definitely, I agree. It's that moment before it happens, isn't it?
Final question for you. What's something you would like to prioritize more?
Oh, what did I write? I can't.
You did. So you actually said that you'd like to stop eating meat.
Oh, yes.
Was what you gave me.
Oh, so I would, I would really, that's what I feel guilty about. And we're trying to do it in our house, which is quite interesting. The trouble is I really don't like lentils.
There is like more to vegetarian food than.
Well, I know, but we had a discussion last night that at some point you've got to start eating lentils as well, because they've got a lot of protein, have they, or something? So I've got to find a way. So no, it is. I should stop eating meat. And are you vegetarian?
No, I used to be.
Oh, did you?
No, less so. I started eating meat during my first pregnancy again. Okay. In fact, we found out I was pregnant because I went and ate meat at barbecue, and it was really out of sorts. Obviously, I hadn't done it in years, so we knew something was up.
Oh, you went and ate it just
my now husband found me like eating a burger in a corner, and he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I don't fucking know, but like I need this burger." And the next day,
that's how you realised you're pregnant.
He suggested, that we did a test.
I also really fancy this coal.
Exactly. But now I do eat it, but on not very often.
Well, I think that's what I need to get to. That was my blind spot, as it were, or my ignored spot of, I just completely excused it all the time, and I realized that that's not really on anymore.
Okay, well, now you've put it like out there to the whole public, so.
Yeah, but in the privacy of my own kitchen. I know, I get totally setting myself up to fail.
Aren't we all the time? Thank you so much. Your book, Life in the Balance, comes out on the 23rd. I got that right?
23rd of February.
23rd of February. And I absolutely loved it. So I hope everyone who's listening to this will go and grab it. It's beautifully written, and there's also some very memorable and insightful stories in there. So yeah, thank you for writing it. I think people are really going to enjoy it. And thank you for talking to me.
Thank you for having me.
Take care, Jim.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode of Priorities, I'd really appreciate it if you could make it your priority today to hit subscribe and also rate and review, as this helps other people find it. Thank you so much for listening.